Ejike was a quiet man, a security officer at a local bank nestled in the heart of Lekki. His job demanded vigilance and composure, but his heart carried the weight of many silent battles. The lines etched on his face were like a map of years marked by hardship and perseverance, each wrinkle telling stories of sleepless nights and cautious hopes. The distant sound of children laughing echoed faintly, a delicate reminder of innocence amid the daily grind. This was his Lagos, a city of contradictions where hope and hardship danced side by side like inseparable partners in an endless waltz. The heat clung to the air, sticky and oppressive, while the occasional breeze carried the faint scent of the nearby Atlantic, salty and fresh. As the sun dipped lower, the sky darkened into a deep indigo, studded with the first timid stars. Ejike prepared to leave for home, his thoughts heavy and tangled. The neighborhood where he lived was a tight-knit community in Surulere, a place where everyone knew each other's business, and secrets rarely stayed hidden for long. It was a place that had shaped him, its dusty lanes and vibrant markets etched into his memory. But tonight, an uneasy feeling gnawed at him, a premonition he couldn't shake, like a shadow lurking just beyond the light. Walking down the uneven pavement, his worn leather shoes scuffed against the cracked concrete, Ejike's mind drifted to the small, mustard-yellow house that awaited him. Within its walls lived his closest friend, Ejike, and Ejike's wife, Adaeze. Their marriage, once a beacon of youthful joy and laughter, had lately been shrouded in silence and tension. Ejike had noticed the signs, the furtive glances, the forced smiles, but had hesitated to intervene. Tonight, however, something compelled him to visit unannounced, a restless urgency pulling him forward. As he approached the house, the faint sound of raised voices pierced the evening calm like shards of glass. His heart clenched tightly in his chest. The door was ajar, and a flickering light spilled out onto the cracked concrete, casting dancing shadows that seemed to writhe with unease. The scent of sweat and despair mingled in the air, heavy and bitter. Ejike's pace quickened, his senses sharpening with every step. He reached the threshold just in time to witness a scene that would haunt him forever. Ejike and Ejike had grown up together in Surulere, their childhoods intertwined, like the branches of the tall iroko trees that lined their neighborhood streets. The trees stood as silent witnesses to their laughter and mischief, their roots deep and tangled beneath the dusty earth. They had shared dreams beneath the African sky, the stars above a canvas for their youthful hopes. Their laughter echoed through dusty streets as they played football until twilight, the worn ball bouncing over cracked pavement and makeshift goalposts. But life, as it often does, had carved different paths for them. Ejike had chosen stability, becoming a security officer to support his aging mother and younger siblings. His days were long and tiring, but his commitment unwavering. Ejike, on the other hand, had married young, determined to build a family, despite the challenges that beckon like storm clouds on the horizon. Ejike was a man of sharp contrasts. He was charming and quick-witted, with a smile that could light up a room and a laugh that was infectious. Yet beneath that exterior lay a simmering anger that few dared confront. It was a tempest waiting to break, a storm that threatened to swallow everything in its path. Adaeze, his wife, was gentle and kind-hearted, a woman whose laughter once filled their gatherings with warmth and light. She worked as a seamstress, her skilled fingers weaving beauty from fabric scraps, bringing pride and color to their modest home. Ejike's visits to Cheek's house had once been frequent, shared meals, spirited conversations, and the comfort of brotherhood. The aroma of Adaze's cooking, the soft hum of radio tunes in the background, and the clink of cups created a sense of belonging. But lately, the atmosphere had shifted. The once vibrant home had grown cold, punctuated by tense silences and whispered arguments that echoed behind closed doors. Ejike noticed the subtle bruises on Adaze's arms during a rare visit, but she dismissed his concern with a forced smile and averted eyes. Each day, Ejike wrestled with his conscience, torn between loyalty to his friend and the undeniable truth that something was deeply wrong. His own life was a balancing act, caring for his family while trying to hold on to the fragments of his youth. Yet the image of Adaze's pained eyes haunted him, urging him toward action he was reluctant to take. That evening, as he left the bank, The weight of his friendship pressed heavily on him like a stone in his chest. He clenched his fists, determined to confront the darkness that had invaded their lives. Walking through the crowded streets, the sounds of Lagos enveloped him, the sizzle of street food stalls, the chatter of vendors bargaining, and the distant call to prayer that floated over the city like a solemn hymn. But beneath it all, a storm was brewing, one that would test the bonds of friendship and the limits of courage. In the weeks leading up to that fateful evening, subtle changes had begun to ripple through Ejike and Adaze's marriage, visible only to those who looked closely and cared enough to notice. Ejike had sensed the tension during his last visit. The laughter was gone, replaced by curt responses and fleeting glances filled with unease and unspoken fear. Adaeze seemed withdrawn, clutching her sewing projects like a lifeline, while Ejike's temper flared unpredictably, his voice rising in sharp bursts that cut through the fragile calm. One sweltering afternoon, Ejike had stopped by unannounced, hoping to catch a moment of normalcy, to offer a friendly smile or share a word of comfort. Instead, he found the door locked tight and the neighborhood unusually quiet, the usual sounds of life muted as if the house itself was holding its breath. A neighbor, her voice low and hesitant, whispered that Ejike had been drinking heavily, and Adaeze had been seen limping near the market, her face pale and drawn. Ejike's heart sank, worry gnawing at him like a persistent ache. That night, as the city hummed with distant music and the occasional roar of traffic, Ejike lay awake, listening to the distant sounds of shouting and crashing objects. The muffled voices carried through the walls like a cruel echo, twisting and turning inside his mind. He wanted to believe it was a misunderstanding, a momentary lapse in an otherwise ordinary life. But the pattern was unmistakable, a cycle of anger and regret that threatened to consume them both. Adaze's once vibrant spirit was fading, replaced by fear and resignation. Ejike saw the bruises she tried to hide beneath long sleeves, heard the tremble in her voice when she spoke of Ejike's outbursts. Yet she remained silent, bound by love, fear, and the heavy weight of societal expectations. The community's whispers offered no comfort, often blaming her or advising endurance with a resigned shrug. Ejike's own frustration grew, a storm brewing within his chest. He felt powerless, trapped between respect for his friend and the urgent need to protect Adaeze. The city's relentless pace seemed indifferent to their suffering, the neon signs and flashing billboards oblivious to the pain behind closed doors. As Lagos moved on, so did the darkness within that small yellow house, threatening to break free like a dam about to burst. That evening, as Ejike walked past their home, the sounds of struggle erupted. Once more, a sharp cry, a slammed door, footsteps pounding in anger. This time, something inside him snapped like a brittle branch. He knew he could no longer stand by. The time for silence had ended. Ejike's heart pounded fiercely as he crossed the uneven threshold of the mustard-yellow house. The door, usually closed tightly against the world, stood slightly ajar, revealing flickering shadows inside that danced like restless spirits. He had arrived without warning, driven by a gnawing fear that had settled deep in his bones, a premonition that demanded action. The air was thick with tension, heavy and suffocating, smelling faintly of stale sweat and something acrid, perhaps burnt fabric or spilled alcohol. Inside, the living room was dimly lit by a single bare bulb hanging from the ceiling, casting long distorted shadows on the cracked and peeling walls. The faded yellow paint was chipped and stained, bearing silent witness to years of hardship. The floorboards creaked underfoot as Ejike stepped carefully, his senses heightened. The scent of despair clung to the air like a shroud. Ejike's eyes quickly adjusted, and what he saw froze him in place, a scene of violence unfolding before him with brutal clarity. Ejike, his friend of many years, had Adaeze pinned to the floor. His fists were clenched tightly, knuckles white, his face contorted with rage and frustration. Adaze's body trembled beneath him, her eyes wide with fear and pain, tears streaming down her bruised cheeks. The sounds of muffled sobs and harsh breaths filled the room, a cruel symphony of suffering. Ejike's mind reeled, disbelief and horror crashing through him like a tidal wave. Without hesitation, he stepped forward, his voice sharp and commanding, slicing through the oppressive silence. "Ejike, stop this now." The sudden intrusion startled Ejike, who turned to face Ejike, his anger momentarily replaced by shock and confusion. Ejike's presence broke the violent spell, and Ejike released Adaeze, who collapsed weakly onto the floor, gasping for breath. Ejike knelt beside her, gently brushing the tangled hair from her face, feeling the warmth of her skin beneath his fingers, despite the coldness in her eyes. Her skin was flushed and bruised, but her spirit flickered with a fragile hope. The room was silent save for the ragged breaths of the three, the weight of the moment pressing down like a heavy stone. This unannounced arrival was no accident. It was a turning point. Ejike knew that the road ahead would be fraught with pain and resistance, but he was determined to protect the woman who had suffered in silence for too long. The mustard-yellow walls bore witness to a moment that would change everything, the air thick with the promise of both danger and redemption. The next morning, the sun rose over Sur-Hilaire, casting golden light onto the quiet streets and bathing the mustard-yellow house in a soft glow. The air was cooler now, carrying the scent of freshly brewed coffee and blooming bougainvillea from nearby gardens. Ejike sat on the worn wooden steps of his modest home, the rough texture pressing into his palms, his mind racing with thoughts and doubts. The events of the previous night weighed heavily on him, like a burden he could neither shed nor ignore. He had witnessed the unthinkable, and now faced a choice: remain silent as before, or become the catalyst for change that his friend in Adaeze so desperately needed. The weight of responsibility settled on his shoulders, heavy but resolute. Ejike's first action was to reach out to Adaeze. He visited her cautiously, bringing food and a comforting presence, the aroma of jollof rice and fried fish filling the small kitchen where she sat. Her eyes, though weary and shadowed by pain, showed genuine gratitude. She confided in him quietly, revealing the depths of her suffering and the fear that had kept her silent for so long. Ejike listened without judgment, his resolve hardening with every word. Together, they discussed options, seeking help from local organizations, finding safe spaces, and considering the difficult steps ahead. The community's stigma around domestic issues was strong, built on tradition and silence, but Ejike encouraged Adaeze to seek help, promising to stand by her as a shield and ally. Their bond deepened, built on trust, shared pain, and a fragile hope. Ejike also confronted Ejike, choosing his words carefully. He appealed to their long friendship, pleading for change and understanding. Ejike's anger simmered beneath the surface, but Ejike's steady gaze unsettled him, planting the seeds of doubt. The conversation was tense, filled with unsaid threats and fragile hope, as fragile as the morning light filtering through the curtains. In the days that followed, Ejike connected with a local women's support group. They provided guidance, legal advice, and a safe space for Adaeze to begin healing. The network extended beyond Sur-Hilaire, offering a lifeline of solidarity and strength. The mustard-yellow house, once a place of hidden pain and silent suffering, began to feel different. Walls that had witnessed violence now held whispers of courage and resilience. Ejike's stand marked the first step toward healing, but the path was just beginning, winding and uncertain. Despite Ejike's efforts and the small flicker of hope that began to glow, resistance emerged swiftly and in many forms. Ejike's anger did not dissipate overnight. It lurked beneath the surface, unpredictable and volatile like a simmering volcano. Neighbors whispered behind closed doors, some accusing Adaeze of provoking the conflict, others warning Ejike to mind his own business with thinly veiled threats. The cultural weight of silence and shame pressed heavily like a thick fog. Adaeze struggled with shame and fear. Each day brought new challenges, avoiding Ejike's gaze, managing household chores that felt heavier than before, and grappling with the stigma of being seen as weak or broken by those she once called friends. Ejike's visits became a sanctuary, a brief respite from the storm, but even he felt the strain weighing on his spirit. One humid evening, as Ejike returned from work, he found the mustard-yellow house shrouded in an eerie silence. The familiar hum of life, the radio playing, the chatter of neighbors, was absent. Inside, Adaeze sat alone on a frayed couch, clutching a faded scarf that smelled faintly of lavender, her eyes distant and hollow. She confessed her fears of retaliation, of escalating violence, and the terrifying possibility of losing everything she held dear. Ejike realized that the fight was not just against physical violence but also against deeply ingrained societal norms and the isolating power of stigma. The community's reluctance to intervene bred isolation, leaving Adaeze vulnerable and alone. His own courage was tested as threats and subtle warnings reached him, challenging his resolve. The mustard-yellow walls, once a symbol of safety and home, now echoed with tension and unspoken fears. Ejike knew that breaking the cycle required more than confrontation. It demanded resilience, strategy, and unwavering support. The battle for Adaze's freedom was far from over, but with every quiet moment of solidarity, the foundations of change were laid. In the midst of turmoil and uncertainty, a new alliance formed. Ejike and Adaze's relationship deepened beyond friendship, rooted in mutual respect, trust, and shared resolve. Their conversations grew longer, stretching into the late hours, filled with dreams of a future free from fear and pain. They spoke of hopes once buried beneath layers of silence and shame, now surfacing like fragile blooms in spring. Ejike introduced Adaeze to Ngozi, the leader of the women's support group. Ngozi's warm smile and fierce determination inspired hope, her presence a beacon of strength amid the darkness. Together, they planned steps to empower Adaeze, skills training to build independence, counseling to heal emotional wounds, and legal guidance to navigate the complexities ahead. The community, once indifferent or hostile, began to stir. Some neighbors offered quiet support, discreet gestures of kindness, while others remained skeptical, bound by tradition and fear. Ejike organized discreet meetings, creating a network of allies committed to change and protection. Ejike's behavior oscillated between remorse and aggression, revealing a man torn by his own demons and regrets. Ejike encouraged him toward counseling, though progress was slow and fragile. The mustard-yellow house became a battleground of emotions, where love, anger, and hope collided in raw and unpredictable ways. Through these shared struggles, Ejike discovered strength within himself. He confronted his fears and doubts, learning that true courage was not the absence of uncertainty but the will to act despite it. The bonds forged amid adversity became a lifeline, illuminating a path through darkness toward healing. One humid afternoon, as the sun filtered softly through the leafy canopy overhead, casting dappled shadows onto the small courtyard behind the mustard-yellow house, Ejike sat alongside Adaeze. The scent of fresh earth mingled with the faint fragrance of blooming jasmine, creating an atmosphere both peaceful and charged with possibility. Adaeze was sewing a vibrant Ankara fabric, her fingers steady and confident as they guided the colorful cloth beneath the needle. The simple act carried profound symbolism, a reclaiming of agency and identity. Adaeze spoke of dreams long buried beneath layers of fear, a tailoring business of her own, a place to help other women find independence and hope. Her voice quivered slightly with newfound strength, each word a fragile yet powerful declaration. Ejike listened, pride swelling quietly in his chest at the resilience shining in her eyes. Their journey had been arduous, marked by setbacks and pain, but in this quiet moment, hope blossomed like a delicate flower pushing through concrete. Adaze's eyes shone with determination, reflecting a resilience forged in fire and tempered by love. Ejike shared his own fears and doubts, finding solace in their shared vulnerability. Together, they planned for the future, envisioning a life where silence would no longer be a prison and where courage would light the way. The mustard-yellow walls, once witnesses to despair and suffering, now bore the promise of transformation. The air was thick with the scent of fresh fabric and hope, mingling with the distant hum of Lagos life. The honking cars, the laughter of children, and the steady rhythm of a city that never truly sleeps. This awakening strength was not just Adaeze's, it was Ejike's. The community is a testament to the power of resilience and the human spirit. The road ahead remained challenging, but the foundation of courage had been laid, strong and unyielding. Tensions reached a boiling point one sultry evening, when the air hung heavy and thick like a suffocating blanket. The mustard yellow house, usually a refuge from the world's harshness, became the stage for a confrontation that would change everything. Ejike's frustration erupted, fueled by jealousy, shame, and the corrosive weight of unspoken pain. Voices rose, sharp and angry, accusations flying like knives cutting through the fragile equilibrium that had barely held. Ejike, alerted by neighbors' whispers and the unmistakable sound of raised voices, arrived swiftly, his heart pounding with dread. The atmosphere was electric with fear and anger, crackling like static in the heavy air. Ejike's eyes burned with desperation and regret. Adaeze stood her ground, no longer trembling, her chin lifted with quiet strength. The community gathered at a cautious distance, their whispers a tense chorus of hope and fear. Ejike stepped between them, his voice firm and unwavering like a shield. "This ends now, Ejike. No more silence, no more pain." The words hung in the heavy air, a challenge and a plea rolled into one. Ejike's rage faltered, replaced by anguish so raw it broke through the barriers he had built. Tears streamed down his face as years of bottled emotions spilled forth in a torrent. Adaeze approached cautiously, her hand reaching out, a gesture of tentative forgiveness and hope. The mustard yellow house held its breath, the walls echoing the raw human drama unfolding within. This breaking point was both an end and a beginning, a moment where truth confronted. Denial and healing began its tentative journey toward the light. The days following the confrontation were marked by quiet reflection and cautious healing. The mustard yellow house felt different, less a prison and more a sanctuary of recovery and hope. The air seemed lighter, carrying the faint scent of fresh paint and blossoming flowers from a neighbor's garden. Ejike entered counseling, confronting his past and his pain with tentative steps and open heart. Adaeze continued her tailoring work, her confidence growing with each stitch and customer served. Ejike remained a steadfast presence, balancing roles as friend, protector, and confidant. His own life felt fuller, enriched by the bonds forged in struggle. The community, moved by the events, began to challenge old prejudices and embrace change, their whispers turning into conversations and eventually support. The scars remained, both visible and hidden beneath smiles and quiet moments. But so did the hope, a fragile yet persistent light that promised a better tomorrow. The journey toward recovery was ongoing, fraught with challenges but illuminated by resilience and shared strength. Ejike often visited Adaeze's small tailoring shop, the scent of fabric and thread a comforting reminder of transformation and new beginnings. The mustard yellow walls, once symbols of suffering and silence, now stood as monuments to courage, healing, and renewal. Together they had navigated darkness and found light. The story of that unannounced arrival had become a testament to the power of intervention, friendship, and the unyielding human spirit. Ejike knew the final confrontation with Ejike required careful preparation. The emotional stakes were high. The fragile peace depended on strength, empathy, and strategy. He met with Ngozi and other allies from the support group, crafting a plan grounded in support, accountability, and safety. The mustard yellow house, once a silent witness to pain, would become a place of resolution and hope. Ejike gathered information, legal contacts, and emotional resources, building a network ready to act if needed. The weight of responsibility pressed on him, but his resolve was firm. He also spent time with Adaeze, helping her prepare emotionally for the confrontation ahead. They rehearsed conversations, envisioned possible outcomes, and fortified their resolve with quiet affirmations. The air was thick with anticipation and determination, mingled with the distant sounds of Lagos, the constant traffic, the hum of life, like a steady heartbeat beneath the tension. Ejike's own growth was evident. No longer hesitant or fearful, he embraced his role fully as protector, advocate, and friend. As night fell over Surulere, Ejike stood before the mustard yellow house, ready to face the past head-on and claim a future free from fear and silence. The night was heavy, the sky cloaked in darkness as Ejike arrived unannounced at the mustard yellow house. The street was quiet except for the occasional rustle of leaves and distant dog barks. Inside, the air was tense, charged with anticipation and the weight of unspoken truths. Ejike awaited, his posture guarded yet resigned, shadows playing across his face in the dim light. Ejike's voice cut through the silence like a sword.
"This ends tonight, Ejike. For Adaeze, for yourself."
The words carried the weight of years of pain, hope, and an unyielding desire for change. Chick's offenses crumbled as the conversation unfolded, a raw exchange of truths, regrets, and tentative promises. The air vibrated with emotion, anger, sorrow, and a flicker of hope. Adaeze entered, her presence a beacon of strength and courage. Together, they faced the shadows that had loomed for too long, breaking the chains of silence. The room seemed to breathe with their shared resolve. The mustard-yellow walls, once silent witnesses to suffering, now held the echoes of change and the beginning of healing. The confrontation was not a battle of fists, but of hearts and minds, a transformative moment where courage overcame fear, and a new chapter began. In the days after the confrontation, a new rhythm emerged within the mustard-yellow house. Cheek committed to change, attending counseling sessions regularly, and making amends through actions as well as words. Adaeze embraced her independence, her confidence blossoming with every step towards self-reliance. Ejike continued to support them both, his role evolving from rescuer to friend and counselor. The community's attitude shifted gradually, inspired by their story and the courage it took to confront painful truths. The mustard-yellow house became a symbol of resilience and hope. Its walls no longer held secrets of pain, but stories of transformation, forgiveness, and growth. Together, they rebuilt trust and forged a path toward a brighter future. The scars remained, reminders of past wounds, but so did the strength to overcome them and build anew. The sun rose over Sur-Hilaire, casting warm light on the mustard-yellow house and illuminating a new chapter in its history. Adaze's tailoring shop buzzed with activity, vibrant fabrics fluttering in the breeze like colorful flags of freedom and renewal. Laughter and music filled the air, a testament to courage and transformation. Ejike stood nearby, watching with quiet pride as customers came and went, their voices blending with the rhythmic beat of drums from a nearby celebration. The journey had been long and difficult, but the bonds of friendship, resilience, and courage had prevailed. Ejike, transformed and repentant, worked alongside them, committed to healing and rebuilding not only his marriage, but also himself. The community embraced the change, inspired by their resilience and the power of intervention. The mustard-yellow walls, once stained with sorrow and silence, now radiated hope, strength, and possibility. In the heart of Lagos, amid the city's chaos and endless motion, a story of courage and transformation had taken root, one that would inspire others to find their own light in the darkness.